Tonight, some Russians living here in Massachusetts are voicing their opposition to Vladimir Putin's decision to invade Ukraine.
On the night of January 1st, 2024, migrants were detained in Moscow. They were taken away under the pretext of supposedly searching for inaccuracies in the database.
Imagine living in one of the world's largest countries, renowned for its rich history, art, and culture, yet feeling like the walls are closing in. What if the place known for its grandeur and influence suddenly seemed less inviting? Today we'll discuss why no one wants to live in Russia anymore. In recent years, there has been a significant decline in Russia's attractiveness as a destination to live in for both its locals as well as immigrants. Despite its vast natural resources, considerable influence in global affairs, and strategic importance, Russia is facing both internal and external turmoil. From skyrocketing inflation and economic instability to political uncertainty and international isolation. The challenges faced by the country are anything but trivial. Let's dig deep into the many reasons that have caused so many people to pack up and leave Russia.
It's many years, generation of propaganda. That people, I'm talking about people who really trust and support this horrible leader, Putin, I mean.
We'll begin with the basics. It has been more than 2 years since Russia invaded Ukraine. Prior to the war, Russia enjoyed a period of relatively robust economic expansion. Before 2014, Russia had comparatively strong economic growth, driven largely by high oil prices and expanding consumer demand. For example, in the early 2000 AES, GDP growth rates were consistently around 7% annually. Since 2014, Russia's GDP growth has been inconsistent and generally weak. The annexation of Crimea and subsequent international sanctions that targeted finance, energy, and defense contributed to a slowdown. For instance, Russia's GDP growth fell to about 0.3% in 2015, and the economy contracted by 2.7% in 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The war in Ukraine has intensified these sanctions from Western nations, further isolating Russia from the global financial system and restricting access to international capital markets. All this resulted in a slower growth rate estimated between 1.5% and 2% annually as of mid-2024. Now, how exactly did the war affect Russia? Let's get into the details. Following Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, the Western nations, including the European Union, the United States, and other allies, imposed a ban on Russian oil to apply economic pressure on Russia to stop its military activities and as a sign of condemnation. The oil ban was designed to target Russia's crucial energy sector, which is a significant source of revenue for the Russian government. Russia is the world's second largest oil producer and exporter after Saudi Arabia, and the ban on oil exports to key markets like the EU and the US led to a significant reduction in revenue from oil sales. In 2023, it was estimated that Russia's oil revenues had dropped by approximately 30 to 40% compared to pre-sanction levels. An oil cap was also approved by the Western allies, which aimed to prevent Russia from getting more than $60 per barrel of crude oil. According to Kyrie, due to these measures, Moscow is losing out on about $175 million a day from fossil fuel exports. With the reduction of exports, Russia now faces a need to find alternate buyers. But who is buying Russian oil? India, China, and Turkey have all ramped up their purchases of Russian oil, with Russia selling it at a significantly lower price than the global benchmark crude price. Now you would guess that all this means a substantial discount in oil prices for the Russian citizens too, who would be less partial and more than willing to step up and purchase the oil. But that's not the case. The reason being inflation and the very weak ruble. In 2022 and 2023, Russia experienced high inflation rates, a direct consequence of the war. Inflation, the rate at which the general level of prices for goods and services rises, determines purchasing power and impacts economic stability. It is a key economic indicator that reflects the cost of living and the overall health of an economy. In this case, the prices for goods and services went up, as Russian companies were passing on the burden of sanctions to consumers in the form of price increases, contributing to a higher cost of living. For example, in 2022, inflation reached approximately 14.5%, driven by disruptions in supply chains and currency depreciation. Facing a tight labor market, made worse by the number of men drafted to fight at the front, Russian firms have been forced to raise wages, which also drove up inflation. In July 2024, Russia's central bank raised its key interest rate to 18%, the highest level in more than 2 years, in response to the concern in Moscow that the country's wartime economy risked producing runaway inflation. This is close to the high 20% interest that the central government pushed through as an emergency measure just after Russia launched its invasion of Ukraine in early 2022. Annual inflation in Russia stood at 9% as of July 2024, far higher than the 4% the country's financial authorities had been targeting. This scale of overheating in the first half of the year is reported to be the greatest the Russian economy has seen in 16 years. Shifting our focus to the public's response, when inflation is bad, one of the main solutions is to move your money into a more stable currency. That takes us to the ruble's exchange rate, an important factor in Russia's struggling economy. While the currency has shown relative stability compared to its historical fluctuations, the ruble remains under pressure from both domestic and international factors. At the end of 2021, that is before the invasion, 100 rubles bought $1.30. That value plunged to just 70 cents on March 10, 2022, 2 weeks into the war. Though the rate increased to $1.80 by June, it correspondingly went down by December of the same year. Russia's political instability, which leads to investor caution, economic sanctions, oil ban and fluctuations in oil prices are all contributors to the ruble's weak performance. Basically, nobody wanted to buy rubles. As of 2024, 100 rubles is equal to about $1.10. This has further exaggerated inflation, as well as made imports more expensive, posing a problem for businesses that relied on foreign goods and services. The one business that has boomed since the beginning of the invasion is unsurprisingly the war industry. Russia has dramatically increased its war spending. War spending refers to the financial resources a government allocates to military operations. This includes everything from deploying troops to purchasing weapons and funding logistics. As the demands were now soaring, with Russia needing everything from bullets to artillery shells to vehicle parts for the invasion effort, there has been a shift in budget priorities, with more funds directed towards defense rather than domestic programs like healthcare and education. Russian military spending accounted for almost a third of all expenditures in the country's 2024 budget, which came to around $100 billion. The level has more than tripled since the invasion of Ukraine in 2022. While this has provided a boost to the Russian defense sector, with increased employment in the area as well, it results in cuts in other sectors to make up for the budget drain, resulting in a rocky economic stability. To finance the war, Russia has increased its government borrowing. While the country's debt-to-GDP ratio remains relatively low compared to many other nations, the rise in debt levels places additional strain on the economy. In 2023, the fiscal deficit was estimated at around 1.5% of GDP, a notable increase from previous years. The economic strain, growing war tension, and a shift towards authoritarianism under Putin, with a notable erosion of democratic institutions, have all caused public unrest and dissatisfaction. Adding to this, concerns about human rights and a general condemnation towards the war further declined Russia's appeal as a place to live. The UK Ministry of Defense estimated 1.3 million people to leave Russia in 2022. Russia's largest private bank, Alfa Bank, estimates that 1.5% of Russia's entire workforce may have left the country. Most of those who left are highly skilled professionals. Companies complain of staff shortages and hiring difficulties. Russia's central bank reported in the early stages of the war that Russians withdrew a record 1.2 trillion rubles, or around £12 billion from their accounts. This is a scale unseen in Russia since the 2008 financial crisis, and that pretty much sums up the ongoing Russian crisis. To understand the current situation, it's useful to look at the historical context. Russia's economy has faced similar pressures in the past, especially during the Cold War era. But today's economic environment is more complex, with global integration and high-tech industries playing a major role. But it's important to remember that amidst these challenges, people are making courageous decisions to seek better opportunities and more stable environments. Whether it's moving abroad for a fresh start or adapting to new realities, the resilience and determination of individuals are truly remarkable. As we wrap up, we'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think about the factors driving the people from Russia? How do you see the situation evolving in the future? Drop your comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.